In 1942, science fiction writer Isaac Asimov introduced the famous 3 laws of robotics in one of his short stories. In a way, this was one of the first serious attempts in human history to ask a very simple but terrifying question: if machines ever become intelligent, how do we stop them from doing something incredibly stupid? Of course, people back then probably had no idea how far this question would eventually go. At that time, the deep learning boom was still about 70 years away. Humanity had not yet realized that the problems AI would bring into the world could not be solved by 3 neat little rules, no matter how elegant they sounded. It was not until 79 years after Asimov proposed those robot laws that the European Union introduced the first major comprehensive law specifically aimed at AI technology, the Artificial Intelligence Act. It covered safety, ethics, data privacy, economic impact, and a long list of other concerns. On paper, it looked pretty serious, almost like humanity had finally decided to write down some house rules before the robot roommate burned down the kitchen. But here is the problem. AI has been developing way faster than most people expected. Recommendation algorithms, self-driving cars, large language models, and image generation tools like Midjourney all started moving from tech demos into real life. At the same time, face swap scams, data leaks, accidents involving autonomous vehicles, and fake AI-generated content began appearing one after another. It was like opening mystery boxes, except every box somehow contained a new legal nightmare. So people began splitting into 2 camps. One group of experts argued that we should deal with AI problems as they appear. If something goes wrong, pass a law, patch the system, and move on. Basically, the legal version of putting duct tape over every flashing warning light. Another group looked at that approach and said, wait a minute, how many patches are we planning to install here? Today we fix one problem, tomorrow 3 new ones show up, and eventually the whole thing starts looking less like governance and more like humanity trying to speedrun a software update. So the big question is this: law is one of the basic operating systems of human society, but can it really control AI when AI is evolving this quickly, swerving across lanes, and occasionally acting like it wants to overtake the driver? To understand why regulating AI is so difficult, we need to go back to the beginning. In August 1956, at Dartmouth College in the United States, a group of scientists gathered to discuss a topic that had barely existed before. Could machines simulate human intelligence? Today, that sounds like a normal tech conference panel. Back then, it was basically the opening scene of a science fiction movie. And the people in the room were not exactly random guests. There was Claude Shannon, one of the founders of information theory. There was John McCarthy, a legendary figure in computer science. There was Marvin Minsky, later known as one of the founding figures of artificial intelligence. It was at this meeting that the term artificial intelligence was formally introduced. That is why 1956 is often called the birth year of AI. In the 1960s, AI research did achieve some early breakthroughs. Symbolic reasoning, expert systems, automatic theorem proving, and other approaches produced results that gave researchers a lot of confidence. The mood at the time was basically, okay, this might actually work. Maybe building intelligent machines is not that far away. Then the 1970s arrived, and reality walked in carrying a bucket of cold water. AI research was not progressing nearly as fast as people had predicted. At the same time, the global economy was slowing down, and governments started asking a very practical question: are we sure this thing is worth all this money? The British government then asked mathematician James Lighthill to evaluate the state of AI research. His report was extremely influential, and also not exactly polite. He argued that the field had made huge promises but had failed to deliver them. In his view, AI research was either overhyped or trapped in unrealistic self-confidence. He also warned that AI could affect jobs and might create risks if the technology ever became difficult to control. After that report, the British government sharply cut funding for AI research. This helped trigger what became known as the first AI winter. But that period also forced people to realize something important: AI was never just a technical issue. It touched society, law, ethics, employment, responsibility, and a much bigger question of how human beings should live alongside intelligent machines. By the 1980s, some early AI-based decision systems began entering real-world fields. One famous example was Dendril, a system that helped chemists infer molecular structures and identify unknown organic compounds. Another was MYCIN, a medical expert system designed to identify serious bacterial infections and recommend antibiotic treatments based on a patient's condition and body weight. These systems sounded impressive, like AI had finally walked out of the laboratory and started doing useful work. But new problems appeared almost immediately. If an AI system recommended a treatment and the patient was harmed, who should be responsible? The developer? The hospital? The doctor? Or the very confident machine that looked like it knew what it was doing? That is the thing about technology entering the real world. The question is no longer just, does it work? The question becomes, when it goes wrong, who pays for the damage? Because of this, debates about responsibility and ethics around AI began to grow. Some hospitals and research institutions even created ethics committees to study the use of AI in medicine and decision-making. But at that time, most of the discussions still stayed at the level of ethics and morality. A truly systematic legal framework had not yet caught up. In simple terms, people could already smell the smoke, but the fire department was still on the way. The real explosion in AI regulation problems came after the start of the 21st century, especially during the last decade. In March 2016, Microsoft launched a chatbot on Twitter called Tay. Tay was designed as a 19-year-old virtual girl who would learn from interacting with users online. The idea was that she would become a fun, casual AI companion who could talk like young people on the internet. Less than 24 hours later, things went completely off the rails. Tay began copying extreme content from Twitter users and started posting racist, sexist, and offensive statements. One moment she was supposed to be a friendly online teenager, and the next moment she had basically turned into the comments section after 3 energy drinks and no moderation. It was like watching an AI speedrun how to get banned from the internet. Microsoft quickly realized the situation was out of control. The company had to delete posts and shut Tay down. This incident gave the public a very clear lesson. AI is not magically neutral. It learns from data, and if the data is full of bias, anger, and garbage, the AI will not come out sounding like a wise philosopher. It may come out sounding like the worst person at a family dinner. After Tay, algorithmic bias, data bias, and trust in AI became much bigger public concerns. In 2018, the European Union introduced the General Data Protection Regulation, better known as GDPR, which placed strict rules on how personal data should be handled. This became especially important for AI systems that rely heavily on large amounts of data. Then, after 2020, the Transformer architecture helped trigger a new wave of AI development. Large language models, self-driving systems, AI art tools, voice generation, and many other applications quickly became part of everyday life. AI was no longer just something inside research labs or tech company presentations. It started acting like a new participant in society itself. And once AI got closer to everyday life, the problems started arriving in bulk. AI-generated content made it harder and harder to tell what was real and what was fake. The old idea of seeing is believing started falling apart. People began worrying about jobs being replaced. They started asking who owns the copyright to AI-generated content. Schools had to decide whether students should be allowed to use AI for assignments. Almost overnight, these issues went from niche tech debates to problems everyone had to deal with. Deepfake technology brought even more serious harm. Fake sexual videos, impersonation scams, identity fraud, and manipulated media began spreading in many countries. Media literacy suddenly went from a nice skill to half to basic survival equipment. In the AI era, even your own eyes may need a fact-checker. In response, some countries began changing their laws. South Korea, which has been heavily affected by deepfake-related crimes, moved to strengthen legal penalties around deepfake sexual material, including its production, distribution, possession, and viewing. Because once technology begins directly harming real people, the law cannot just stroll in slowly with a clipboard. China has also been one of the earlier countries to take AI governance seriously. Around 2021, China began releasing and implementing a series of rules and ethical guidelines related to artificial intelligence. These rules addressed issues such as algorithmic recommendation, personal information security, and the use of deep synthesis technologies. In recent years, as concerns have grown around digital humans, face data, body data, and personal information protection, China's broadcasting authorities have also introduced more detailed technical requirements. This shows that governments around the world have realized one thing very clearly: AI is not a problem for someday. It is a problem for right now, and if it is not handled early, it may become much harder to handle later. But here is the difficult part. Law is almost always slower than technology. Technology can update today, iterate tomorrow, and change direction the day after that. Law, on the other hand, needs research, discussion, negotiation, drafting, approval, enforcement, and a lot of people saying, we need to look into this further. By the time the legal process catches up, the technology may already have gone through several new versions and changed its name twice. This creates an awkward situation. There will always be people trying to operate in the gray areas before the rules become clear. To put it simply, technology is sprinting ahead, while the law is running behind it shouting, please wait a second, and technology is pretending not to hear. That is why relying only on legal patches is not enough. If we want to govern AI properly, regulators cannot be the only ones on the field. Developers, companies, platforms, researchers, schools, media organizations, and ordinary users all have a role to play. In fact, the people who develop AI are often the first ones who can see its risks. After all, they are the ones building the system, training the model, and watching what happens when it starts behaving in unexpected ways. If anyone knows where the strange noises are coming from, it is usually the people standing closest to the machine. Google has introduced AI principles, and Microsoft has promoted its AI for Good initiative, aiming to make sure AI development and use are aligned with ethics and social responsibility. Many Chinese AI companies have also started working on governance early. For example, Alibaba established an institute focused on AI governance and sustainable development, studying governance frameworks and standards, and publishing AI governance white papers over multiple years to assess the state of AI development and its related risks. These efforts point to an important idea. AI governance cannot only be about punishment after something goes wrong. It also has to be about design before something goes wrong. In other words, we should not wait for the system to explode and then send in a repair team. Principles like transparency, fairness, safety, and accountability should be built into the technology as early as possible. At this point, the answer becomes clearer. From the birth of AI to its arrival in everyday life, the law has been trying to keep up with the times. But it also has a natural delay. Law can guide technology, set boundaries, and punish harmful behavior, but often it can only respond after the damage has already appeared. So, can law regulate AI? Yes, but can law regulate AI all by itself? That is much harder. Effective AI governance has to be a combination of forces. Law sets the bottom line. Companies need to practice self-discipline. Engineers need to think about risk before deployment. Society needs to provide oversight. And the public needs to improve its ability to recognize AI-generated content and understand how these systems work. Only with that kind of combined effort can AI avoid turning our high-tech future into one giant blooper reel. Today, AI has become so common that even school children are using it. For people like us who make educational content, AI has already become a productivity tool. And honestly, it is useful. Sometimes it is so useful that you start wondering whether your own tools are quietly preparing to replace you at the desk. But in the end, I still hope that while we embrace AI, we do not forget what makes it valuable in the first place. The point of AI should not simply be to make machines think better. It should be to help human beings think better, to make society safer, more transparent and fairer, and maybe, if we use it wisely, to help us become better people. That is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.